Kelly Ripa had always believed that marriage was a series of small, deliberate choices made every single day. Some of those choices were glamorous: red carpet hand-holding, anniversary trips to places with white sand and no cell service, the occasional spontaneous dance in the kitchen at midnight. Others were quieter, less photogenic, and far more revealing. Choosing to stay in the same bed as a man who snored like a freight train that had somehow learned to play the tuba was one of those quieter choices. She stood in the doorway of their bedroom one ordinary Tuesday night in 2024, watching Mark Consuelos sleep. Or rather, watching him attempt to sleep while producing a soundtrack that could have been used as a deterrent for burglars. The room was dim, lit only by the soft blue glow of the digital clock on his nightstand. 2:17 a.m. Kelly had been awake for 40 minutes. She had tried everything: earplugs, white noise machines, a fancy sound masking app that claimed to generate ocean waves of pure serenity. Once she had even worn a pair of industrial-grade noise-canceling headphones to bed, only to wake up with deep red marks on her ears and a crick in her neck that lasted 3 days. Mark, for his part, had tried the usual remedies: nasal strips that made him look like a very handsome raccoon, a special pillow that cost more than some people's monthly car payments, and a brief, doomed experiment with sleeping on his side that lasted approximately 11 minutes before he rolled onto his back and resumed the concert. The phrase sleep divorce had entered the cultural conversation with the subtlety of a marching band. Podcasts dissected it. Lifestyle magazines ran glossy features about couples who maintained separate bedrooms and claimed it had saved their marriages. Friends at dinner parties admitted, half joking, half serious, that they had started sleeping in the guest room 3 nights a week. Kelly had listened, smiled, and privately decided that the whole idea sounded like giving up. She padded barefoot across the carpet and slid back under the covers. Mark stirred, one arm instinctively reaching for her the way it had for nearly 3 decades. His hand found her waist, heavy and warm. The snoring paused for a blessed 3 seconds, then resumed at a slightly lower volume, as if the mere presence of his wife had negotiated a temporary ceasefire. Kelly closed her eyes and let the sound wash over her. It was annoying. It was also the sound of the man who had been beside her through every version of her life. Young and broke in New York, newly famous and slightly terrified, raising 3 children who somehow turned into actual adults, surviving career pivots and family crises, and the ordinary wear and tear of long marriage. The snoring was part of the package. She had signed up for the package. The next morning, she was on the set of Live with Kelly and Mark, bright under the studio lights, trading banter with the man who had kept her awake half the night. The audience laughed when she teased him about his nocturnal symphony. Mark grinned that familiar, slightly sheepish grin and shrugged. "I prefer to think of it as ambient entertainment," he said. The crowd loved it. Kelly smiled for the cameras and felt the same private resolve she always did. She was not going anywhere. That afternoon, between segments, a producer mentioned the sleep divorce trend in passing. Kelly laughed it off, but later, alone in her dressing room, she found herself thinking about it more seriously than she expected. Separate beds, separate rooms, the quiet luxury of uninterrupted sleep. She could almost taste it, the deep, dream-heavy rest of someone who did not have to negotiate with a human foghorn every night. Then she pictured the alternative, waking up alone in a different room, the other side of the bed cold and unused. No heavy arm draped across her at 3 a.m. No mumbled half-sentences that made no sense but somehow still felt like conversation. No shared morning stretch, and the ritual complained about who had stolen the covers. The thought left her colder than any night of interrupted sleep. She went home that evening and found Mark already in the kitchen, making the kind of elaborate omelet that required 3 pans and an unreasonable amount of cheese. He looked up when she walked in, eyes soft. Long day. Average day, she said. You? I slept great. She laughed, and he looked momentarily confused, then caught on and laughed with her. The sound of their shared amusement filled the kitchen the way it always had. Easy, practiced, real. Later that night she told him, half joking, that the internet was full of people recommending sleep divorces. Mark raised an eyebrow. You thinking of filing papers? Considering it, she said. I've got a strong case. Exhibit A, last night's performance of Freight Train Concerto in B-flat. He set down the spatula and crossed the kitchen in 3 strides. His hands settled on her waist the way they always did when he wanted her full attention. I'll try harder, he said. Sighed, sleeping. Mouth tape. Whatever the latest miracle cure is. Just don't move out of the bed. I sleep better when you're there. Even if you kick me. I do not kick. You do. It's like being married to a very small, very determined soccer player. She leaned into him. The omelet was beginning to burn. Neither of them moved to save it. I'm not going anywhere, she said. The snoring stays. You stay. That's the deal. He kissed the top of her head. Deal. They ate the slightly scorched omelet standing at the counter, talking about the kids, the show, a possible weekend trip upstate. Ordinary life, the kind that accumulates into something extraordinary if you pay attention. That night, Kelly lay awake again, listening. The snoring started softly, built, then settled into a rhythmic rumble she had mapped so thoroughly she could almost predict the next variation. She thought about all the nights she had spent in this bed, nights of new parent exhaustion, nights of worry, nights of quiet celebration when one of the children got into college or landed a first job. The bed had held every version of them. She reached over and rested her hand on Mark's chest. The snoring stuttered, then softened. His hand covered hers without fully waking. In the dark, she smiled. The following weeks brought the usual mix of public life and private negotiation. Mark tried a new anti-snoring device that looked like a medieval torture instrument and lasted exactly 2 nights before being banished to a drawer. Kelly experimented with a weighted blanket that made her feel like she was being gently crushed by a very polite elephant. They compromised on an upgraded white noise machine that produced a respectable approximation of rainfall. None of it fixed the problem completely. Some nights were better. Some were worse. On the worst nights, Kelly sometimes slipped out of bed at 3 a.m. and sat on the living room couch with a book and a cup of herbal tea that claimed to promote restful sleep and mostly just tasted like wet grass. She would read until her eyes burned, then return to the bedroom and the familiar soundtrack. Each time she climbed back under the covers, she made the same quiet choice. This was still where she wanted to be. One Friday night, they hosted a small dinner for friends. The conversation, as conversations among long-married couples often did, eventually drifted towards sleep habits. Someone mentioned a celebrity couple who had publicly embraced the sleep divorce